Welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Joe Veslak.
I'm Emily Thomas.
And we are going to talk about a car that has been around for a very long time today that just got a redesign. And it is the 2025 Nissan Murano. We drove one that we rented from Nissan, but we also bought one of our own. So we got to drive the top of the line Platinum with all the goodies. And then we bought our own, which is an SL, which is very well equipped. It comes with there's only one engine and transmission choice. It's a 241 horsepower, 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, 9-speed automatic transmission, and all-wheel drive. The MSRP started at $46,560. A couple of options got added on, mostly carpet related, and
Paint.
Yeah, paint and all kinds of stuff that you put in the car, and that plus the destination fee. This is a $49,320 SUV, which is okay. Just get that out of the way. That's a lot of money for a Nissan.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a lot of money for any kind of 2-row SUV. And just by comparison, the last time we drove one of these, which was a long time ago because it's been a long time since they redesigned it, was in 2017. And the one we purchased was $10,000 cheaper.
Wow.
So that's not inflation. That's just this is a different car. Mm-hmm. So I know, Emily, you loved the last one.
Yeah.
You loved that car.
I did. I signed it out a lot. And this was, right around when I first started working here. So I'd only been here maybe a year or two. But yeah, I signed the Murano out a lot. So I was pretty excited when I saw that we were buying a new one for our program. Also because we're in this weird limbo state at the track where our fleet is either what I refer to as like the behemoth vehicles or we have like the tiny toy car vehicles. And like the Murano was going to be kind of right in the middle.
Yeah, we got a 500E or we've got a Land Cruiser.
Exactly. Yeah. I just wanted something that was reasonable to fit inside my garage. And I was like, great, we're going to get the Murano. We'll have a nice mid-sized car. And I was excited because, again, I love the last one. So I'm like, a car that I like. It'll be great. This is not that car.
Oh, no.
It's not. And I was kind of really bummed about it.
I'm just going to pause because I think we all have things to say here about it.
Yes.
But I just want to say why. I just want to get a little history. So 2002, this thing comes out and it's like, oh my gosh, there's an SUV that isn't it isn't a behemoth. Mm-hmm. And it's, this is kind of the first crossover SUV. And it was a little nicer than other stuff that was out there. Mm-hmm. And it sort of created this segment. But we're, a couple of decades later.
Yeah.
And, the just right size, everyone's kind of got that. So I guess I'll start by what's the number one thing that sticks out to you why you don't like it?
With this new one,
Yeah.
I don't like the driving. It was not a pleasant engine transmission experience for me. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of like lurching of the vehicle when I was trying to like speed up, or it would be okay at first and then out of nowhere it would lurch again. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, why is there like this delayed attempt to gain speed? It just felt really unrefined. And like, I'm not one of our acceleration testers. I mean, we have Joe.
Yeah.
Joe is.
I'm right here.
Joe is the acceleration tester, right? So, but for me to notice how inconsistent that delivery was, it's bad.
All right.
But
Joe.
we'll go to the
it's
we'll go to the expert.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's interesting that you say that. I agree with the lurching and the delay off the line. To me, for the vehicle, it's more about accessing the power. And when doing so, you find yourself always tipping into the pedal, the accelerator, way more than you normally would. But once you do give that larger input, you'll actually get some of that feedback, some of that power. It does have decent power if you ask for it. And once you're up and going, the transmission does shift pretty smoothly and is, pretty well timed. But that being said, it has, it has limits. And outside of those limits, you run into a lot of those issues with delay, which you experience, which, happens or occurs more often than not.
Yeah. I think for everyday driving, it would just not, I'd be too annoyed by the inconsistency.
Yeah.
like you're right. Once I kind of get up to speed, it's okay, and it typically stayed consistent. There were a few times though when I was using adaptive cruise control on the highway, and here, on my commute home, it turns into a little bit of an uphill climb, not significantly steep, but a little bit of a grade, right?
Yeah.
And the set speed that I had put for the adaptive cruise, the car couldn't maintain it. It was falling behind, and the RPMs were kind of set. The vehicle then tried to put a little bit more power in, but it wasn't actually able to do it. And so I think I put in the logbook, I was like, it's kind of like the little engine that really couldn't.
Fuel time for fuel economy, try to overambitious to shift into a higher gear in an effort to, save fuel. You see that happen quite a bit. And it's circumstances like that when you're either on a hill, long grades where, it's kind of forced to downshift, or it's just more active than you would like.
Yeah, I thought was interesting because I spent a lot of time in both of them. I put about 200 miles on both of the cars. And one of them, I when I drove the one that we rented from Nissan, it's a prototype. So I thought, well, okay, when we buy our own, it's going to be better than this.
Yeah.
Because it's, Nissan sent us a vehicle that, had all these caveats, and it said, well, please don't judge us based on this. It's our, it's not a final production vehicle. It's it's a pre-production. Sorry, it's not a prototype. It's a pre-production. And that's why we would never write a review based on one of those.
Right.
That's why we buy our own, because we want to make sure we're getting what you're getting. But in the case of this, I thought, well, it's really shuffling gears here. It's the revs are hanging when I'm going down hills. Anytime I'm coming from a stop, there's a lurch. If I'm in stop and go traffic, there's this hesitation, which we find in a lot of cars now. But this is extremely unrefined.
Yeah.
Then we get into the one that's sold at a dealership, and it's the same exact thing. And I thought, that's okay. So this is not a pre-production hiccup. This is just a hiccup.
I feel like even for me, I feel like I always said with the ride on the borrowed version, or rented, that was, I thought it was a little better than others. Then I took ours home and felt, that ours felt like it may have even rode a little worse. But if not, pretty similar to after speaking with other people, and my experiences seemed like they were pretty close to being the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I liked about it, I felt like it controlled kind of lean and body roll a little better than most SUVs that size.
Yep.
And the steering feel was kind of like an interesting mix of it was a little relaxed, a little cushy, but also gave you just enough sense of
it was natural enough to feel pretty good.
All put together, you got this sort of kind of cushy suspension that also lets bumps pound in. You've got this pretty, kind of straight ahead, very, no lean in curves. And then you've got a bit of a relaxed steering, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It put together, is it a highway cruiser? Is it a sporty SUV? What is it? Nothing really kind of makes sense. You put it all together.
Yeah, I found that I enjoyed it most on the highway. Steady state driving wasn't bad. That's because I like the seat. I fit comfortably in the seat. And if I'm going to sit in it for a long time, that's a nice thing about this vehicle. It's actually somewhat comfortable to sit in. But that, in terms of driving, it does the best at a steady state, usually on the highway. Smooth
Flat
roads,
highways.
like most cars. You get smooth. Every car is going to ride smooth on a smooth road for the most part. But
so it does its best in a straight line at a
straight line.
Speed. Yeah.
No hills and no changes in speed. I also liked the seats. I thought the driving position was pretty good.
Yeah.
The thing that I wish the seats had, though, was, when the front part of the seat cushion can tilt down, it lacks that.
Yeah.
And so for me, because I have to move my seat up a lot, usually I can compensate with how high I have to sit to see over the dash by tilting down the front edge so that my legs are more comfortable for reaching the pedals. And I don't get that here. And I wish, especially at $50,000, I wish that it had that front seat tilt. And
you get four-way lumbar, which is nice.
It is nice. It does not help my driving leg, though. No.
Yeah, I agree. Having a lot of cars like BMW having that adjustable leading edge and extending that seat cushion for more thigh support and just remedying situations like you're in is really nice to have.
Yeah.
But not here.
Not here.
I mean, I think is it time to kind of talk about the controls? Because I think everyone has a control story. I mean, if you think we've been a little harsh on it, maybe you want to look away, tell small children that this content could get a little oof. Because these controls are unique.
Yeah, unique is a very compassionate way to put it.
So you look at the inside of this car and you say, wow, the designers did a really good job. It actually, it looks really pretty. It's laid out. It appears to be laid out in a very straightforward way. It has that look that's kind of minimalist, but it doesn't take away too much. And then you actually try and use it. And I mean, I described it as kind of like a choose your own adventure where you don't know what a button's going to do.
Yeah.
And it might send you to a totally different screen, or there might be a physical button for something and also
A touchscreen.
a touchscreen control for it. Exactly. Or certain things you can only control with a touchscreen. So the steering wheel, you can turn on the heated steering wheel with a button or through the touchscreen. But if you want to turn on the heated seats,
Only through the screen.
and it's a button that's smaller than the size of your fingertip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
An
maybe your
animation
favorite. Mine
of-
was okay, but even still,
Yeah,
to
I've
very
got fat fingers.
precisely. What I didn't understand was on that touch screen, there's ample real estate,
Yeah.
but they made the buttons they made the icons so small and like all the way at the bottom. So like you really have to be precise when you're trying to touch those buttons and like change the.
Yeah, you're tapping other things all the
I
time.
wanted to
next
zoom
to it.
in. I wanted to can we make it like 200%? Yeah.
Even CarPlay, you can see once you go into CarPlay, even like the Messenger app, the Spotify, your apps are significantly smaller than most, infotainments along with CarPlay when CarPlay's on.
Yeah.
And you're constantly, I'm tapping, trying to hit Spotify, and you hit the phone icon, or, and that happens a lot when you're doing, like Emily said, with the heated seats, I'm either tapping that, but by accident, either hitting the steering wheel, or there's just a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also didn't understand why some buttons were touch capacitive, but they were also ones that you could press down on.
Yes.
And so like it wasn't always clear what I needed to do, right? Because the buttons are kind of just like they're just flush with the surface.
so
And
these are like the climate control.
climate control buttons, right? They're
Other than the seat heaters. All the other
Yes.
climate
Yeah,
control.
all the other climate controls are on this like wood panel. So they're not even like on a regular kind of, surface. They're on this wood panel. And then you're like, okay, do I touch it? Do I push down on it? Do I kind of do a little bit of both? And then your steering wheel controls, some are touch, some are pressed down, some are scroll wheels that are not all at the right angles.
Yeah, there's a diagonal
There's
scroll
a diagonal
wheel.
scroll wheel that I couldn't understand if I was supposed to like turn it to make it straight. Also, I didn't know
And then
why
there's-
I would scroll at a diagonal.
There's a button on the steering wheel controls that switches which screen
Right, but
you
it's not-
control with one
It's
side.
not clear that that's what that button does.
And you have to look at it to see which screen you're controlling. So you could be
Yeah.
trying to control the center screen with the steering wheel controls, and all of a sudden find yourself changing, something that's that's behind the
Cluster.
steering wheel in the gauge cluster. Yeah, it's an absolute disaster. And then my nightmare control story is I'm driving along and I realize, I have to change something on the steering wheel controls. The sun's shining from behind me. These controls are backlit, so they're totally washed out. And for some reason, they don't seem to do a very good job automatically changing brightness
they
based on.
Definitely
technically are automatic,
Yeah,
just not well.
exactly.
Yeah, it went into night mode when it was still somewhat bright out, so then it dims everything, and then I couldn't see the steering wheel controls at all.
Yeah.
And so
I was cupping the steering wheel controls
So you could
yeah, because they were too faint because of the sun glare. Like
Yeah.
when I left the office, it was still daylight, and I was like, okay, I can still see what's going on. But then as I was driving and I got to the highway and I wanted to, the left side is also where you access, like your adaptive cruise and the ProPilot Assist and
Yeah.
all those kinds of controls. So I'm on the highway and I want to turn it on, but I can't actually see what the buttons are anymore because they've gotten so faint, even though there's daylight coming through the windows.
Well, it's glaring on that's the worst. You have glare as well as a dim light behind
yeah,
it.
so
it's a struggle.
I cupped them so I could see what they were first.
You need one of those like Matthew Brady, like Civil War photographer, like where you go like behind the hood so it's dark and you can see. Like, yeah, it's crazy. It is a really, it really feels like a bunch of teams were working on the controls and they kind of like all turned in their work and then it just kind of got installed.
Yeah, they didn't look at a holistic approach, I think. Or they didn't check each other's work. The placement even for that physical heated steering wheel control and the steering control, like the steering, driver assist.
Yes.
Why are they not on the steering wheel? Two things that have a steering wheel symbol are not on the steering wheel. They are on the random button spot down to the left of the wheel, below the dash.
Yeah, it feels like I'm looking around, like I'm like looking around the car for things and my eyes are off the road. On top of that, also, I noticed the lane keeping assist did a decent amount of ping-ponging. I felt like I was like when I was like, second grade going to a birthday party at a bowling alley and it was, they put up the bumpers and the gutters, that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
This was not one of the better implementations of the ProPilot Assist.
Which is a shame because ProPilot Assist is pretty decent.
Right.
Yeah.
We've experienced it be far better in other Nissans, but this one, not so much.
It's the 1.1 and they're already up to 2.0 in other ones and 3. Yeah. So
And to your point, it's on ProPilot Assist, following curves, but exiting the lane. And then dinging me, being like, "You're out of the lane." I'm like, you are out of the
your
lane.
fault. I love the car dinging it itself. It's like the self-aware future of cars. And you're like, you're making a mistake.
But not correcting for it.
Yes.
Right? Just being like, you're still just going out there. And I'm like, well, yes, because now I have to steer you back into the lane and override it, even though that's what it should be able to do it by itself.
That's usually that's why I used it very little and had the same experience. And that's why I just go right to shutting it off. I mean, I enjoy driving. So anything to just that gets in my way, I immediately can turn off and just, I prefer driving myself rather than bouncing in the lane.
I don't trust sometimes some of these systems as much as I think as many people do, but I'll turn them on to help, especially on like if I'm, driving up to see a family member or you get 2 hours, behind the wheel. Yeah, it helps out. Absolutely. But at the same time, if it's not actually going to help, if it's going to be a worse driver than I am, even if I'm like it's not great.
They're meant to be assistants, and some of them are more detrimental than others.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's all. I mean, there's a lot that wasn't great, but I mean, getting in and out of the car wasn't so bad. In the front, it was. I had to duck my head, and again, I'm not tall, so I had to duck my head. But then when I got into the back seat, it's more squared off. I think the door opening, so I didn't have to duck my head.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty high point in this, for this vehicle is getting in and out is easy. Traditional door handles, the seat height is close to ideal, so you just slide in and out. There is a little bit of ducking because of the sloping roof lines around the A-pillar, but in general, there is no frustration there, especially for me. I like access. I find that, it just drives, it's steady state pretty decent. And then, it's somewhat comfortable to sit in. So it held up over longer trips. Seat comfort for me held up, pretty
even in
well.
The rear, I did sit there briefly just to see how it was. It's cushy. It's a little flat, which I think will probably make it easier for car seat installations because there's not as much bolstering that would kind of limit how a car seat would interact with a vehicle seat. So I think in that regard, it could still be really good. I was a little surprised when I opened the rear door. I was like, oh, the rear cabin space is a little smaller than I anticipated. Both my kids are in forward-facing car seats, so they were okay. Even with me adjusting my seat, they still had okay room. They probably would want a little bit more, but still decent enough. But again, I'm short to average at best, right? So for an average to a little bit taller driver, you might be really kind of infringing on that rear cabin space. And if you had to put rear-facing car seats, that might be more challenging. So we were having a car seat technician here at the track, and we were having a discussion. and one of the things we were saying, is that sometimes families will be like, oh, I'm going to get us an SUV because I need more space, right? For the car seats and stuff. Our family's growing. But then you have to kind of be careful because even though it's an SUV, there's a good number of them that actually have like less rear cabin room than some sedans. So I always recommend that families take their car seats with them when they're going to go purchase a car and install it in the car that you're looking at to make sure that you can fit them there, you can get a good installation, but that as a whole, you can now fit in front of them as well.
Yeah.
And it's not just car seats too, because I think the thing that surprised me the most is when I opened the rear hatch of this SUV, and there was less space than a Rogue.
Yeah.
This is a small. This is a big,
It's very square.
small car. This is a small, big car. No, it's a small, big car. That's what it is. It's like the opposite of like a TARDIS. Like it's somehow smaller on the inside than on the out.
Contrary to like the Honda Accord.
Yeah.
Honda Accord, you get inside and it's like, oh my gosh, I have way more room than I would think. But this is not that way.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder who this car is for, because it's Nissan. And it's funny because we got a lot of comments online when we put out our top picks that the Nissan Sentra was one of our top picks, and people were saying, why do you like this? Oh, you're in the, you love Nissan. Why do you love Nissan? Well, okay, well here's, we do when they make a car that's
good.
that's great, and this one we'll see when we put it through the full test. But so far the consensus is kind of what, this is not a luxury brand. This is not a luxury car. And for a little bit more, you could actually get something like a Lexus RX. For less, you could get something like a Hyundai Santa Fe, which is a rather large car without being a behemoth. So kind of who is this for? This like odd size that's like a little too tight for car seats, that like can't quite fit like a ton of stuff in the back. Like who is buying this? And maybe I lack empathy. I don't know, that I can't imagine. But to me, it just seems like the car that went from being sort of just right to being just a bit confused about what it is.
Yeah, it's almost for either you're single or just you and a significant other, and you're just looking for an alternative or something different.
Or you could be like a family of 3 or 4 where, in my situation, car seats are forward facing, right? So you're not worried as much about that fore aft space, right? And maybe you're not having to lug around quite as much kiddo gear. It's not like I'm throwing the big stroller into the trunk anymore, right? So it could appeal to that. I will say one thing that I've always appreciated is that Nissan does a pretty decent job with safety systems.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So this vehicle does come standard equipped with automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, blind spot warning, rear cross traffic warning. It has a standard rear seatbelt reminder, rear occupant alert, like the end of trip kind of system that will use door logic to tell you at the end of your trip that, hey, you put something in the back, someone in the back, make sure you check for them. As Joey experienced, if you put something in the back and then you get out and you lock the car will honk at you to try to remind you and grab your attention again.
Multiple times.
Thankfully, it was just his backpack. But, it does come, it has advanced seatbelt technology in the rear outboard seats and side torso airbags. So Nissan does a good job of equipping their vehicles with safety systems that we know are proven, are effective, right? We'll see how those systems do in our testing, in the IHS testing. But that is a plus side to going for a Nissan vehicle.
Yeah. And that's why so many of their vehicles do end up getting accolades, despite maybe in some other areas not being quite as competitive as vehicles from, say, Toyota or Honda or other brands, which don't make those standard on all their vehicles.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to spend some more time with the Murano. It sounds like instead of everyone fighting over it like the last one, that it'll be like, I guess the Murano's left. But
only driving on flat straight roads.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So we are gonna put 2,000 miles on it. I did my part. I put a couple hundred on it. Then we're going to put it through all of our tests. And if you sign up for our newsletter, we will even let you know as soon as we're done scoring it. So I'm excited to see what happens, because the longer you spend with something, sometimes a vehicle will sort of reveal its charms to you.
Yeah, it could get better, could get worse.
It has a deep hidden personality just waiting for us to find it.
Exactly. Or there could be a software update for the transmission logic.
Yeah.
But either way, no matter what, you're going to find it in a little while on cr.org, and you can read our full first drive as well, where we talk about some of these issues in a little greater depth, and we have some more folks weighing in on their experiences with the vehicle, which are truly mixed. So I think we said enough about the Murano. So I think it is now time, with your permission, to move on to your questions, which you have submitted at cr.org/talkingcars. And if you send one in, you get swag. And none of us are wearing swag today, but
none
you
of us are we should be.
I have some
demoing.
at my desk. I can go grab it.
Yeah, watch an episode with Mike Quincy, and he's head to toe in CR swag. It looks like he left his gym clothes and had to get something from the locker back here. So head over to cr.org/talkingcars and send in a video question the same way that Jerome from North Carolina did. Take it away, Jerome.
Hi guys, I'm 18 and I love the show. My question has 3 parts pertaining to high voltage hybrid batteries. The first part is this: at what mileage do the batteries need to be replaced? Secondly, what are some symptoms that show the battery is failing? Third, will replacing the battery cost a lot of money, just as EV batteries cost thousands of dollars to replace? Thank you and keep up the good work.
So thank you, Jerome, for your excellent 3-part question.
Yeah, all stuff I want to know, because we recently bought a hybrid, used
good.
hybrid.
Okay.
So
You didn't research that before?
I didn't, but thankfully I work with you, so you will have the answers for me.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah,
exactly. All right, Joey, take it away.
Yeah, so for starters, in terms of mileage, there's really is no specific mileage, but I mean, we've had experience. I know you can speak on that. We've seen some of these, early first gen Toyota Prius.
They're older than Jerome.
Yeah, they're
Way older than
going, and they're
Jerome.
still going without needing a battery replacement. So just the simple answer for Jerome is there is no mileage. It kind of depends. You want to, obviously you're keeping manufacturer's reliability in mind when you're making those decisions, but I wouldn't, look at it as here's a specific mileage that you expect the battery to go bad at.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I had a Prius that went 165,000 miles before I sold it, and it was still on the road for years. And for after that, I know Tolly, who's behind one of these cameras here, had one that had 280,000 miles on it. And you might see a little bit of degradation in terms of fuel economy as the battery gets a little tired, as we all do as we age. Goes to bed a little bit earlier. starts eating dinner
More
at 5:30.
fiber.
Exactly. Has to stretch when they sit up, but still getting decent fuel economy.
Yeah.
And we also we hear from don't just take our word for it. We hear from thousands of hybrid owners in our reliability surveys.
Yep.
If you look at our most reliable vehicles, year after year, it's hybrid. A lot of that, like you said, it's because they're coming from reliable manufacturers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it shows that this technology has been around for almost 30 years now. And
It's crazy to think that, right?
I know
how long they've
It's not
been
as
around.
new as some people might think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, so we don't, it's not like you have to get your transmission fluid flushed at something or other. It's, some of these will outlast. I know in Tolly's case, he said he thinks the battery's going to outlast the car as we're in the Northeast and there's a little rust going on here. So, and now let's see. Part 2. He could remember all 3 parts. I can't remember all 3 parts. Second part. Okay. How do we know it's going to fail?
Yeah, so certain symptoms, you're going to want to look for warning lights, and that's more obvious stuff to see, like lights that will come on. One thing you just mentioned, that you're going to look at maybe your fuel efficiency going down, that battery, doesn't have the capacity it once did. It may be down to 80%, whatever percentage it may be, but you're going to look at, you feel like, are you down on power? Yeah, just stuff like that. You'll notice either performance or efficiency, maybe minor changes at first, and yeah, just kind of paying attention to stuff like that.
Not ignoring all the lights.
Yeah, don't ignore your lights. A lot of this stuff, I mean, it should be pretty obvious. When you see these lights come on, it should, be a telltale of what's happening. Or most people, if you have a light come on, you should, get it checked out and go from there. And in this situation, that may happen, or you might just notice something like you were talking about before, where it may not always want to recharge the battery back to 100% SOC or wherever it may be.
And then as far as the cost is concerned, I know we hear these nightmare stories of, I went to the dealership and they told me it would be $25,000 to replace the battery. And then you kind of look a little more and you find sometimes it's not that usually.
Yeah. And it comes from, especially you just mentioned how long they've been around, and the longer, hybrid technology stays around and has been around, the more aftermarket support and everything is out there. And as well as the batteries went from early on being the nickel metal hydride.
Yeah.
And now, lithium ion. So those older batteries are probably, I don't know, a fraction of the cost to replace. I'm not sure. But,
yeah, when I looked, it's like maybe a couple grand.
Yeah,
it's not that expensive. I mean, that's expensive, but in terms of things that happen to a 10 to 20-year-old car, it's within the realm of expected costs.
And it's a component that does has a lot of value in your car, that it's, giving you that extra efficiency. It's propelling the vehicle. So for $2,000, you look at it and you're like, well, for what it does, it doesn't seem so bad.
Yeah. So what do you think? Are you convinced that your hybrid's going to last a long time?
Yeah, especially because, right now it's our commuter car for my husband, who works from home mostly, and we are primarily using it just when he drives 15 minutes to Hartford or to do the kids' school pickups. So we're not working it hard at all.
You should take it instead of the Murano next time.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I hope that answers your questions, Jerome. Our next question comes from Rory from Las Cruces, New Mexico, who asks, it seems that European vehicles are equipped with advanced safety features years before they're approved for use in the United States. My question is, why? Is the U.S. government lax in approving such features? Are the insurance companies in our country at fault in some way? And what can be done to speed these approvals, if anything? So that sounds like an Emily question to me, if I've ever heard one. So take it away. Tell us, give us the regulatory landscape of the vehicle safety in the U.S. in a nutshell.
Well, Rory, let's start off with the fact that, so you're not wrong, right? What you're saying is absolutely true. In Europe, they have what's called the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE. That's their regulatory body. It has 56 member states, so there's 56 countries that are involved in this. So they create the regulations, or the minimum safety standards for vehicles, among other things, I believe, for these countries that are involved. Now, separate from the ECE regulations, which the U.S. equivalent is our Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, FMVSS. And that is done by NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, our regulatory body. So in Europe, you have ECE, and then you have, separate from that, Euro NCAP, or the Euro New Car Assessment Program. Those are controlled by two separate entities. Euro NCAP is a consumer information ratings program, right? So they will do testing that goes beyond the regulatory standards to push the marketplace to advance safety. In the U.S., our NCAP program is governed by NHTSA. It is not governed by a separate entity at all. And so you have this federal regulatory body, NHTSA, that is in charge of both our minimum safety standards as well as our consumer information program, which means that NCAP is subject to all of the federal rulemaking processes that the regulatory standards are also subjected to. So it has to go through a notice of proposed rulemaking, right? It has to go through the cost-benefit analysis to make sure that, what is being proposed is not going to be like an undue burden on consumers, and it's going to have
on automakers
who have a big
say.
Right? And that it's not going to drastically increase the price of vehicles or increase the price of car seats or tires or whatever it is, and it's going to provide X amount of safety and save this many number of lives. It has to go through all of these things, has to go through a comment period where the public, manufacturers, advocacy groups, independent orgs like us can comment on what's being proposed. Then they have to review all of that. They have to then submit a final rulemaking. This process takes years. And even when Congress tells NHTSA they have to do something by X year, right? It often takes way longer than that because NHTSA is under-resourced, they're underfunded, it takes a long time to do the due diligence research for these things to make sure that it's going to come out well.
And even when they do propose something, sometimes it gets rolled back by a change in the weather in terms of politics. Like we saw around automatic emergency braking standards,
Yes.
These great new standards that would have been industry, they would have been leading the world in terms of how stringent they were and making safer cars and saving lives. And all of a sudden someone comes in and says, well, this isn't a priority anymore, and they're rolled back.
Correct. And it's
This is after all of that.
Yes, this is after that whole long process. And, it's unfortunate because the U.S. actually started the NCAP program, right? Back in 1979, the first NCAP program was started in the United States.
Under Joan Claybrook at NHTSA.
Right? But if you look at NHTSA's website for the ratings program, the last update was in 2016, and it was to add automatic emergency braking to the recommended list of advanced safety technologies that should be on a car. Recommended list, not a tested list, a recommended list. So we are like way behind. If we had the ability to like decouple NCAP from the regulatory body so that it could be governed on its own and not have to go through the regulatory process, we could probably make more advancements. But right now it's just so tied up in the process that like we are no longer the world leaders in vehicle safety. And manufacturers will equip their vehicles according to the market that they are selling in. So if the regs in that market are higher than ours, if the consumer information programs in that market that are giving them their 5-star ratings and helping them sell more cars and making them look better in the marketplace compared to their peers are more stringent than ours, then they're going to equip those vehicles more than they do for the US.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I just want to point out that, Rory, you were right maybe 20, 30 years ago when it would be, Volvo had the side airbags before anyone else. Mercedes had ABS before anybody else. But now it isn't just the European brands. It's it's like you said, it's sort of automakers choose what they're going to, they choose their battles. And in the United States, we have the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, which is not a government entity. They're independent, and they give these awards for the top safety picks and the top safety picks plus. Consumer Reports, our rankings take those into account. And they also take into account the features that a vehicle has. So basically, any car on the road can get 5 stars from NHTSA because nothing's really changed in a long time, and everyone's built their cars to meet those standards. IAHS, totally voluntary, but some manufacturers, so one that comes off the top of my head is Mazda. They have all these top safety picks because they kind of went in and decided we're going to prioritize this as a brand. Just as we were talking about earlier, Nissan saying we're going to give all our cars standard blind spot warning, which allows them to, be top picks in our case, whereas other brands will say, you know what, we're going to leave some of those features off. So some of it is also these sort of outside organizations that are driving that, but also there are changes that are happening that are being driven in other parts of the world as well. This isn't just
Europe,
just
us against Europe anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Global NCAP has launched NCAP programs throughout the world. And so you have the Bharat NCAP in India. You have ASEAN NCAP for Southeast Asia. You have Latin NCAP. You have the Australia, New Zealand NCAP. All of these programs, if you look at the NCAP programs globally, they have more tests than we do in the US. They are looking at things like child occupant protection, including dynamic testing of pediatric dummies in the rear seats of vehicles and car seats.
They're testing for people outside the car.
They're testing for vulnerable road users. They're testing for seatbelt minders. They are testing for things that are still just on our recommended list. And there's an opportunity here for NCAP in the US to do better, to be more. And in the gap that has created is where we have these consumer information programs like the IHS, like Consumer Reports, that have taken a stand to be like, we're going to require that manufacturers have standard safety systems, right? We're going to pay attention to what you're doing in the rear seat. We're going to make sure that your driver's side and passenger side vehicle structures and crash worthiness are the same. We're going to hold manufacturers to a higher standard so that there can be better vehicles in the US, because US consumers deserve to have the same level of safety that you're putting into these other markets.
Absolutely.
And we say this to them all the time. But it's important not just for us to say it to them. Consumers have a ton of power, and they should be letting manufacturers know that these things are important to them. Because I've had manufacturers tell me, hey, our customer base in the US doesn't really know about that safety countermeasure. They don't understand what it is. They don't know what it does. They don't really care if it's there, so we aren't prioritizing it. And that's where everybody can play a role. You can give feedback to your loyal manufacturer and be like, I do know what that is. You know why? Because Consumer Reports taught me, and I know it's important to have on my car, and you should be putting it there. I'm going to stop buying your cars.
Yeah.
Use that consumer power. It was a great moment for me when Toyota launched their new Sienna, the 2025 Sienna, and they implemented the radar-based rear occupant alert system. This is a system that's going to remind you, it not only will remind you that you've put passengers in the rear seat, but it also uses radar sensors to detect occupants in the rear cabin so that nobody gets left behind and there's no risk for vehicle heat stroke.
And you hear about these horrible things happening where something's changed slightly in someone's routine. They forget who they think, oh, my spouse took the kid to daycare, and then a horrible tragedy happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. On average, there are 37 or 38 deaths per year in the United States, and these are preventable. Toyota launched this radar-based rear occupant alert in the US first, compared to all of their other markets, because we have been pointing out to the manufacturers that you keep putting safety systems in other marketplaces first, and you don't put it here in the US, and US customers are suffering. And they told us, they were like, we did it here first because you've been saying this again and again.
And let me give a little credit where it's due. It's when and Consumer Reports as a whole, but you, Jen Stockberger, Mike Block, sort of our team here, and our advocacy team as well, who made that happen. So I just want to give you a little credit there.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
I was definitely really pleased with that. And so all this to say, you're not wrong, Rory. There's a lot that can be done. We can make it better here in the US through our consumer information programs, but especially through customers giving feedback to manufacturers, being like, we care about safety. We see what you're doing, right? It's a lot more transparent now. You can easily find out what a vehicle is equipped with in another market and be like, why, if you know that it's important enough to put somewhere else because it's effective, then why are you not putting it on my car? Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
So absolutely. The only other one thing I want to bring up is I think Rory also probably is aware of things like adaptive beam headlights, which are, we get all these questions about why are headlights shining in your face? Why are they so bright? Why are they so bright? In other parts of the world, there are headlights that can they're LED headlights, and they change how much they light up the road ahead depending upon what car's there. And they'll basically dim on, it isn't just on or off. They'll dim on a spectrum and also directionally, so they don't shine in your face. They reduce glare. They make it easier to see ahead, and the headlights can be brighter too for when you're behind the wheel. But in the United States, the way that things are written, basically that Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, the FMVSS you were talking about, if it's in there, it's a rule. If it's not in there, you can do kind of whatever you want, basically, which is why we have cars that don't have round steering wheels or door handles that you can open, but we say what a headlight has to be. And in other countries, that's not necessarily the case. So these manufacturers have come out with these headlights that they're able to sell in other places because they're able to get approval for them. But in the US, it's, well, nope, that doesn't fit into what our rules for a headlight say. And then there's the whole comment period. So Rory, a thing you could do is if you see one of these opening up, actually, you know, if you see a comment period opening up for a notice of proposed rulemaking, write in to NHTSA and say, I want this feature. This feature should be something that we want. Write to your congressperson, write to your senator, say that this is important. And, you know, that's something which might actually move the needle on this if there is that sort of groundswell of support of these things, because that does change. Yeah, so
absolutely.
Joey, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to that.
You like safe
done.
cars?
Yeah, I love safe cars.
Excellent. Well, I think we've talked about enough for this week. It was fun. It was informative. I hope you thought so too. And if not, then you can write to us and
tell us how to improve.
Tell us how to improve. And maybe we'll even send you some swag. cr.org/talkingcars. Thanks so much for talking cars with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.